Hi, my name's Sam Whiting, and I'm legal counsel for the Massachusetts Liberty Legal Center. In this video, we'll be covering 7 of the most common questions that we get from students and their parents about what their rights are in Massachusetts public schools. First question that we often get is, do I have the right to opt my child out of sex education in Massachusetts? And the answer to this is an emphatic yes. When it comes to sex education in Massachusetts, you make the call for your child, no questions asked. Under Mass General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 32A, you have the right to opt your child out of sex education and human sexuality issues by submitting a written request. All you need to do is submit this request at the beginning of the year. You don't need any special reason to do so. Second question that we often get is, can I opt my child out of content that conflicts with our family's religious beliefs? And the answer to this, again, is yes. Now, up until recently, Massachusetts courts had held that the answer to this was actually no. Once you enrolled your student in a Massachusetts public school, you essentially gave up all of your rights to determine what they were being taught there, even if it conflicted with your sincere religious beliefs. But the Supreme Court has now held, in a case called Mahmood versus Taylor, that you do have a right to opt your child out of this type of content. Parents' rights don't end at the schoolhouse gate. The Mahmood decision requires notice and an opportunity to opt out of any content that poses a very real threat of undermining your ability to instill your religious beliefs in your child. And while that decision dealt with LGBT content like storybooks for elementary schoolers covering things like same-sex marriage or transitioning to a different gender, the language in Mahmood actually expands beyond just those topics to anything that poses a similar threat of undermining your right to direct the religious upbringing of your child. Practically speaking, all you need to do is notify the school in writing of the conflict with your beliefs, and they have to then notify you when this content comes up in the curriculum and allow you to opt out. I encourage you to go to our website, malibertylegal.org, to find a template that will help you opt out of this kind of content and also that sex education content. Question number 3, does my child need to get vaccinated if this conflicts with our religious beliefs? The answer to this is no. Under Mass General Laws, Chapter 76, Section 15, you have the right to opt your child out of any vaccine that conflicts with your religious beliefs. Again, all you need to do is submit a written request, and you don't need to elaborate on your religious beliefs. These are private for many people. You also don't need to use a school form. You can send an email, a letter, or any other type of written request. The bottom line is that no one should be forced to choose between receiving a public education and honoring their faith. The fourth question is, do I have the right to review my child's curriculum? And the answer to this is pretty straightforward. Yes, you do. Unfortunately, schools aren't always transparent about what they're teaching to children in public school, and so you may need to submit a written request to actually go in and review the curriculum or get copies of it. But there's 2 legal avenues through which you can do that. One is at the state level, the Massachusetts Public Records Law. All curriculum is a public record, and so you can request it via that method. And then the second method is under actually a federal law called the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. And that law has a provision that says you also have the right to review all of your child's curriculum. The key point here is that you are the primary educator of your child, and you should know what they're being taught, even in public school. The 5th question is, can I opt my child out of surveys that the school wants to give to them? And the answer to this also is yes. This is increasingly a big issue in public schools across Massachusetts and across the country, where schools are often giving surveys to students covering very sensitive and sometimes intrusive topics like drug use, sexuality, sexual history, mental health, self-harm, problems with family. And for good reason, a lot of families are uncomfortable with their children being asked these questions. But fortunately, that same federal law that we just talked about, the PPRA, gives students and parents the right to opt out of any survey that they don't want to be exposed to. Practically speaking, again, what you need to do is submit a written request specifying that you want notice and an opportunity to opt out of these types of surveys, and the school has to honor that if they want to continue receiving federal funds. The bottom line is that you have the right to determine what kind of content your child is exposed to in school. The 6th question is, can the school force my child to agree with something that they don't believe in? And the answer to this is no, absolutely not. The U.S. Supreme Court held all the way back in 1948 in a case called West Virginia versus Barnett that students and others can't be compelled by the government to speak a message that they don't believe in. This was actually in the context of Jehovah's Witnesses who had a problem with saying the Pledge of Allegiance for religious reasons. The Constitution not only protects your right against being censored for the things that you do want to say, but also protects your right against being compelled to speak things that you don't want to say and that you don't believe in. And this right in the school context extends not only to conversations in class, but also to conversations with peers, school employees, just more run-of-the-mill interactions. And where we see this crop up a lot is in the gender identity context with individuals who want to be called by a certain name or pronouns. But if that conflicts with your child's personal or religious beliefs, they do not have to use those terms. The key point here is that no one has the right to conscript your child into speaking their beliefs. Question number 7, finally, does my child have the right to talk about their religious beliefs at school? And the answer to this is yes. Schools are not religion-free zones, contrary to popular belief. Students have the same right to talk about their faith as they would any other topic at school. Generally, if they're not disrupting class or the overall educational environment, they can talk about their faith with other students. And this also extends to things like clubs. So if students can set up secular clubs, like a music club or a drama club, they can also set up a Bible club or another religious club. And this right is protected not only by the First Amendment, but also by a federal law called the Equal Access Act. So that concludes the 7 most common questions that we get about student and parental rights in schools. We hope that this brief overview has been helpful for you as your child goes back to school this season. And if you're facing a situation where you feel like your rights or your child's rights aren't being respected, we hope that you'll reach out to us for help at malibertylegal.org. We'd be happy to see what we can do.